Hi, my name is Carla and welcome to my plant channel, Chlorophyll is the New Black. Today is going to be the first time that I'm actually joining a CareCollab that Nina from Ninja Orchids is organizing. So I'm actually very enthusiastic about it, and I think that is a great initiative. And the topic of today is Oncidium Twinkle. So as you can see, I have 3 here in my hands. And I mean, it's actually pretty nice if you think about it, because you can see how many people takes care of their Oncidiums with different setups, with different climates, what worked for them, and at the end, something like that could work for you better than other things. So it's actually a pretty good overview about like certain specific species that you want to grow at your home. Many channels, about 16 or 17 channels, are actually joining this CareCollab, and you will find the names now on the screen, and you will also have the links to their videos in the description below. Now, just to give a little bit of an introduction about the channel, because this channel is not precisely an orchid channel, it's mostly like general plant stuff, as some of my subscribers know because they have followed me for a while. So I basically do videos about different things about plants, like how to do projects with them, how to propagate them, how to do, for example, closed terrariums, how to do terrariums with jewel orchids, how to do I don't know, different things about your home, how to take care of a certain type of more common houseplants. But I also have my real passion, that is orchids. I have never shown it in my channel, but I actually have like a vast collection of orchids. Now it's above 300 orchids, and I will show you about now. So I basically have a plant room only designated to to orchids. And besides offering them light, because in the rest of my house is basically very dark, the only thing that I supplement the orchids is with some artificial light, to some of them, not all of them, just the ones that I have actually in this room. But the orchids that I have around the house, they basically just grow and bloom and rebloom with the light that is skipping through the windows. So now I live in the Netherlands, so now, for example, that is winter, we have about, I don't know, 8 hours of light or something like that, something crazy. At 4 p.m. it's dark outside. So yeah, orchids also receive just less light. But in order to mimic a little bit more of their nature environment, that's why I actually use the artificial lights, because that beneficiates some of them and actually makes them bloom better each year. Anyway, let's go into the Oncidium, because I have been a little bit overboard with something else. So I have these 3. I have, the only one that I actually have an ID is on this one, this small one, and this is called Oncidium Red Fantasy. On the other hand, it actually looks pretty similar to this hybrid that I got on the store. If you look at the flowers, that I will put like some pictures on the screen, they actually look pretty similar. So they may be like the same variant, or just like, just an Oncidium Twinkle hybrid, right? Anyway, so I have those 2. And I also have this one that is an orange one. I also have no idea, because I also bought it in bloom in a shop. So now, talking about care. What I can tell you is that these plants actually have a very similar, or actually the same care of a normal Oncidium. So I have all my orchids in an organic mix, and that means that this mix that is inside of the pot, it will also degrade over time. So for that, I normally keep them there for maybe 1 or 2 years, maybe 3 years. It depends actually on the orchid, on how I see that the medium is degraded. And but I always do all my setups in organic media. I have tried semi-hydro, but in my climate, unless I actually provide some heat mats or so on, it doesn't work that well. I have lost like entire root systems of Cattleya's and Oncidiums that way when I tried it without a heat mat. But yeah, I already kind of spending a lot of energy with the lights that I'm using to provide light to my orchids, that I don't want to kind of add that cost of the heat mats. Anyway, that's about whatever you prefer, of course. But yeah, my weather is relatively cold in winter, so outside goes to 5 to 0 degrees Celsius. Inside of the house it gets to maybe 18, 16 sometimes. So yeah, I mean, I have to anyway provide heat on those very cold months. Besides that, the rest of the year I basically don't provide any extra heat to my plants. But then talking about, again, Oncidium Twinkle, where I have found that they normally like in my climate and how I have them in this organic media that is composed with sphagnum and some bark, is that I water them and then I let them almost dry, like just before, like I can just put my finger inside of the pot, and when just when I feel that the sphagnum it's like little bit like damp, a little bit wet, that is when I know that it's almost time to basically water my orchid. Of course, I cannot tell you, okay, water it every 7 days or something like that, because actually weather changes and also your orchid changes, right? If it's a bigger orchid, will actually consume more water than a small orchid. So you kind of have to, try to find your way around it and try to get to know your orchid better. To be honest, since I have so many orchids, sometimes I actually do more like a schedule, saying like, okay, I will just water all my orchids once a week. But then for that, I try to adapt the mix that I put inside. So if I know that this one absorbs too much water, then I will put more sphagnum that retains more water, and that if I water it, it will actually allow me to leave it for a whole week without watering it at all. Also remember that I'm growing them inside of an apartment, so I don't have that much wind or something that will dry the orchid besides normal evaporation and the consumption of the orchid. So yeah, that's how I do it. I also have this is my other twinkle that is again kind of red or pink, and this one I have it just in a kind of more heavy mix that is like cocoa peat or so, and this is just because I haven't repotted since I bought it, and this is a little bit more heavy but also retains a little bit more water. I also want to repot this orchid because I kind of don't like that medium. It starts to compress at some point and that asphyxiates the roots. So it's very important to have aeration to most of your orchids, especially orchids that are epiphytes, meaning they don't grow on the ground, but they grow like attached to trees. So they need all this air for the health of the roots. So in this case, it just gets to compress, and then the roots suffer afterwards. And as you can see, this one I have it just in sphagnum, and the reason why is that I also purchased this orchid and then I saw that there was some rotting going on, so I decided to take it out and to try to save it, and I found out that it had just very little roots. So I wanted them like this small amount of roots to keep the orchid hydrated. So I decided to keep it in a medium that basically will keep a lot of moisture around the roots to try to recover it. So normally I just do this type of setups when I have recovering orchids. Otherwise, I normally put as well bark. But something that is important, of course, is to consider that you need to always permit some aeration. Otherwise, your roots will suffocate and die. So as you can see, the orchid still plump, all the pseudobulbs still fine. So that tells me that actually the orchid hasn't suffered that much, that it's still getting hydrated a little bit at least with the amount of roots that it had. And actually it was I kind of divided, well, it just happened when I was taking it out, it just broke into two. And this, for example, these pseudobulbs are connected and are separate from the one that I just showed you. And you can start to see that it has a little bit of wrinkles there, meaning that this as well had less roots and it's less possible for the orchid to hydrate itself. Okay, so now talking about light, I'll show you now where I actually have my orchids. All these 3 Oncidiums, I have them in different parts of my house, and none of them actually have supplemented light. So now I'll show you where I have them. So this is my kitchen, and here's where I actually keep 2 of my Oncidiums. And you can see, like here near to the window, actually I have Cattleya, some Vandas that also have bloomed. some rhinantheras and so on. And then a little bit further away, if we look here, I have the Phalaenopsis Leodoro, and then we have here my 2 Oncidiums. So they don't get that much direct light. They mostly get direct light actually in the evening, that the sun is basically going down. And yeah, and they just get a lot of indirect light. The window that I just showed you, it's a southwest exposure, and yeah, they basically don't have any problem here, and they don't burn. Now sadly it's a little bit too dark, and the days are too short. Basically at 4 p.m. we are almost pitch dark here outside, but well, they still have a little bit of light because we cook in the night and so on. But for these ones I don't supplement any extra light, and they have done good. Well, you can see actually they have flowered before, and they are basically putting more flower spikes from the mature pseudobulbs. So you can see it here and here. I mean, I also have to clean them up, because you can see that here as well. This just, it's done blooming, and here, this as well. Many flowers already were off. Then we still have a few. Then we have this other flower spike with a few flowers that seems that is still branching. So yeah, basically that's where I keep these orchids. Newer in my collection is this Oncidium Red Fantasy that I will show you in a minute. The setup that I have it is like this board that I actually got in IKEA, and I have them in plastic pots inside of this type of containers. So it's the same for my Oncidium Twinkle Red Fantasy that is actually sitting here. As I mentioned, it's a newer acquisition, and I actually divided as well to give it to a friend, a piece of it. So I kept 3 pseudobulbs, but then they were mature enough to still put on 2 flower spikes. So this is one, as you can see, it's already in flower, and there is the second one developing. Okay, now that you have seen where I have them, I want to add, okay, that's the light that I actually can offer them. As you can see, it's not a lot of light, but still is enough for them to bloom. That could be actually a problem on the long run. For example, if you don't offer your orchid enough light, then they may not bloom. So that's something that you have to consider and adapt it according to how much light and where do you position your orchid in your house. Now, talking about fertilizer, I actually fertilize my orchid maybe once every 2 weeks, and a little bit less in winter. In winter I actually do it 1 every 4 weeks, and this is also related to the fact that I normally go on holiday and so on. So if somebody water my orchids when I'm not at home, then I prefer that they actually water them just with water than adding fertilizers and do all this mix, because of course it's tricky. If you over fertilize, you will burn the roots of your orchid, and then yeah, you may lose the entire root system, right? So I fertilize actually with 1/4 spoon in a gallon of 20-20-20, and as I mentioned, depending on the time of the year, I give them a little bit of fertilizer once every 2 weeks or every month more in winter, even though these orchids don't stop, like they don't have like a winter rest, they will just continue grow. And as you can see, this one, I mean, it's flowering and it's putting some branches, but it's going to continue flowering, but it actually has already the new growth developing on this pseudobulb, and I will show you. So yeah, so they don't take a break, they just continue growing. So they of course need food and they need nutrients all year round. So that's why I don't stop completely to fertilize these orchids. Now, temperature. As I mentioned before, I live in a cold climate. My house can get all the way till 18 degrees or 16 degrees Celsius. That is a little bit on the edge for the orchids, because for this type of orchids, they are more tropical. They normally like a range between, I would say, 18 degrees Celsius to 28 or something like that. It's like a range that you also feel comfortable wearing a shirt in your house, right? Like if I already feel my house too cold, then I try to put a little bit the heater on for a couple of minutes just to balance the temperature. But then basically I just keep, I don't keep like a strict track of temperature. I just feel it, and I feel like, okay, I mean, I'm also coming from Mexico, so I'm also like a tropical plant in a sense, so I will also like feel, if I feel cold, then I will, for my own comfortability in the plants, then I will turn on the heat and then leave it like that for a bit, just to increase a little bit the temperature. What else can I tell you? Like special patterns of the orchids, well, I have them for a little bit more than a year, and I think that they are very reliable. They just keep shooting new pseudobulbs, and almost every pseudobulb has actually flowered for me, so that's actually pretty cool. And also the nice thing is that they don't have like a strict season to flower, in the sense that some orchids will only flower in summer, for example, or will only flower in after you give them like this cool down or something. But these ones basically will bloom every time that they mature as pseudobulb, and you have taken a good care of them, and they had of course fertilizer, and then they had been well hydrated and so on, then they will for sure bloom. So at least with my orchids, that has worked pretty well. I forgot something actually pretty cool of these orchids is that they smell very sweet, almost like milk chocolate. So I love the smell. It's it's amazing. Every time that I step in my kitchen, because I have, as you saw, some of them in my kitchen, I would just approach and smell them, and it would make me happier already. Like, it's a very, very, very nice scent, and I love orchids with scent, so that's a huge plus for me as well. Well, anyway, I just wanted to let you know how I take care of my Oncidiums. If you think that this channel is something that you like and that could work for you, then consider to subscribe. I also have an Instagram account that I will also link below. That's where I post most of my orchids when they flower, and also other houseplants. And if you also have this orchid and would like to participate into further updates, or you would like to actually join these CareCollabs, then drop me a comment, or also contact Nina from Ninja Orchids. And yeah, she's super helpful, and she will be super happy to have you joining the collabs. So thanks for all. If you have any questions, again, just drop them below. And again, if you want to see how other people grows this orchid around the world, you will have the channels linked down below to see their videos and get some tips and tricks. Well, thank you very much, and see you next time.